Welcome, everyone, to a special book presentation of Women's Work in the Pandemic Economy, The Unbearable Hazard of Hierarchy, with Myfan Jordan, and we'll be asking Genevieve Vaughan to join her in conversation perhaps a little bit later with a few questions. Who knows, Myfan might have a question for her. And the Maternal Gift Economy Breaking Through series is hosted by the International Feminists for the Gift Economy. We are very glad you've joined us. I am Letitia Layson, your moderator. I'll give short introductions for Myfan and Genevieve. After the presentation, we will take questions and answers. So let's begin. Myfan Jordan is the director of a grassroots research studio, a co-designer and social research consultancy. She has spent, prior to this, she spent a number of years working in public policy in a think tank per capita, overseeing innovation and applied policy development, and at Council for the Aging Victoria. Myfan is passionate about meaningful community engagement, social housing, aging policy, and advocacy, gender equality, and disability inclusion. Myfan has a BA in social policy from the University of Sussex and a master's in cultural and media studies. She has a diploma in social studies, crime, order, and social control from the Open University, a diploma in journalism, and is an associate to the Healthy Aging Research Group at La Trobe University. Welcome, Myfan.
Thank you so much for having me, Letitia. It's an honor and a privilege to be here, especially after having seen so many of your marvelous salons.
So, Myfan, would you like to just begin and give us a little conversation about how did you, well, first of all, you can tell us about your book, but as you're introducing your book, could you also just include how you came across the maternal gift economy in the first place?
Yeah, thank you. It's actually for me, it was a really interesting journey, and I hope it doesn't sort of sound a little bit irrelevant, but I'll tell you the full story. So taking everybody back to 2020, which was the real beginning of the coronavirus pandemic in Australia and in most countries around the world, I found myself working in what had been my dream job I'd always wanted in said unnamed think tank. I'm not allowed to mention them. I've signed an NDA. So we'd been working in the office. I'd been working there for about 3.5 years. I was the director of social innovation, and I ran the Centre for Applied Policy and Positive Aging with a focus on gendered aging, gender disadvantage. So very much my areas of interest already. But for the 3.5 years that I'd been at that job, which was an organisation which claimed to be both feminist and progressive in its left wings. It was, without giving away too many details, it was funded by unions and by the Labour Party. My female boss there bullied me for about 3 years in those sort of ways, and I detail many of these ways in my book, and I will read a couple of case studies later, but in ways that were quite soul destroying, undermining your capacity for thought, for writing. She used to, put down my writing, belittle my ideas, leave me out of meetings. So all kinds of really terrible things. At one point, I was in Coventry for 6 months, so she didn't actually speak to me. There were only 3 people in the office, and she didn't speak to me for 6 months. But I'm a very stubborn person, and I love my job, and I worked with grassroots community. I did a project helping older women who were setting up micro enterprise, and I did another research project into mutual housing options for older women experiencing homelessness. So the work was fantastic. the boss, not so much. So we come to March in 2020, and Melbourne experiences the first of many lockdowns. It was to become the second most lockdown city in the world. So I'm at home. I've got 2 teenagers at homeschooling, husband somewhere. I'm experiencing severe depression. And my boss was always somebody who didn't just belittle me in public in front of the rest of the staff, but she would also, quite helpfully, as it turned out, write some quite disparaging emails to me. And she wrote one to me one day while I was working at home, and it was just so upsetting. And I didn't want my 2 girls to know that I went on a walk for 2 hours, sobbed and sobbed and sobbed, and I thought, I've got to do something about this. So I raised a staff grievance. I sent it to her. I had a lot of evidence because I'm good at chronicling things. I'm a bit of a researcher, so I picked out things. I had a long list of things that she'd done to me, but I sent it just to her as a staff grievance and said, look, these are things that I'm really unhappy with, and I think we need to kind of try and work out. Her response to that was, I've seen a libel lawyer, and you'll be hearing from my solicitors. So I then, she said, and I've informed the board, which was good because I'd left the board out of it. But I thought, okay, the board knows. The chairman of the board is the CEO of one of the biggest kind of left-wing lawyers firms in Australia. So he knew his stuff, employment law. So anyway, to cut a long story short, the union joined me. I kind of took action. I was successful. I resigned. I had to sign an NDA, and I got a reasonably good payout. So I was left unemployed and on leave. And so I decided, because she really, what she'd done, her treatment over me for so long, had made me decide that, had made me feel as though I was an idiot and I was unworthy of being in that job. I didn't know enough about policy. I didn't know enough about the Australian political system. I mean, I was recruited for my ideas and for my capacity to work with people at the grassroots experiencing disadvantage. But I was also, she took me on and expected me to be able to represent the organisation to MPs and so on. And I needed some mentoring with that. There was no mentoring. And so I talked to friends about it, and the thread that kept coming through was, it's the women. And I thought, it's always the women that act like this. And I thought, well, it can't, maybe it's not just me, maybe it's systemic. And so I decided to just start some research of my own, and I'll go through that a little bit in the PowerPoint. But I put out a survey of looking at women over 40 during the pandemic and their workplace outcomes, and specifically asked a couple of questions about workplace bullying. So while I was doing that piece of research, which I called Generation Expendable, stop me if I'm going too fast because I tend to motor mouth. At the same time, I had a couple of months off working, and I decided to educate myself in areas which I was really interested in, which were basically the areas that you're focused on, but, really focused on climate change. What are we going to do about the planet? Look, so I sort of signed up to Degrowth summer school, and I was very involved in some local online networks, which locally focused online networks called the Good Karma networks. And it just struck me how very gendered those economies were, and how the women working in those economies were so lovely to each other, and how we collaborated, and how we'd, someone would post a message saying, I'm desperate for toilet paper, can anyone help? Or I'm going into hospital, can anyone provide food? And people would step in like that. So it just struck me that there were these 2 very different economies of female behaviour. And I sort of started thinking, well, one is obviously very neoliberal, patriarchal, competitive Australian kind of typical culture. The other strikes me as something which is about giving. And I hadn't really thought about that very much. And I thought, well, it's all about giving. Nobody's taking anything. Everyone's offering things, and it's just so convivial and it's so lovely. And I was listening to a podcast. I did a lot of dog walking in those days, listening to podcasts. And I heard an academic from the US whose name I can't remember, and I never was able to find that podcast again. But she was talking about Australian Indigenous culture, and she mentioned something that she called the gift highway. And this is a practice of First Nations Australians, lots of different clans, tribes, nations, I think over 150 nations in the land so-called Australia. And they would, people would move from town to town, and they would always present a gift. There was always an exchange of gift, and it was a form of communication. And that really rung a bell with me. And I thought, well, this is sort of what I'm seeing in this online good karma network space, this very, very gifting behavior, but it's very gendered. So I consulted Dr. Google, and I kind of Googled gifting plus women, and up came the maternal gift economy movement. So it was just like, wow, these little ideas that have been buzzing around in my head without me really having any theoretical context or anything like that, are actually something, and people have done all this thinking from me. So after that, once I discovered your movement and Genevieve's work and the salons, well, what can I say? The dog got a lot of walking, and I was just there with my headphones and, just thinking, wow, this all makes so much sense. And then it kind of struck me that, maybe there was an idea here in comparing the two economies, because I was hearing so much theory, but very little practice. So, and I had thought that would be really nice to do a PhD, but I can't afford it. So I pitched it to a publisher, and they liked the idea, and I had 6 months to do it. So that's a really long introduction. So apologies for that. But that's how I came across Jen, your work, and everybody else. And those salons were just, opened my mind about all these ideas, and I was just buzzing all the time and comparing them at the same time, because I was interviewing women who'd experienced workplace bullying, and I did a survey around that, and there was a survey around the gift economy thing. So I'll talk about that a little bit more in PowerPoint, and then read maybe a couple of case studies by way of comparison. And does that sound okay to everybody?
It sounds wonderful. So whenever you're ready, let's just begin. That was a great introduction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm not very good. I get a bit nervous, but I'm sure you'll bear with me. Okay, I'm switching to my PowerPoint. So this is actually the PowerPoint which I delivered at the recent conference in Rome, which is where I am now, which is the International Association for Feminist Economics. And it's a tale of two economies, which is actually what I wanted to call my book, or I wanted to call it The Gift Highway, but the publishers were very keen to call it by the very dry name, Women's Work in the Pandemic Economy, or the Pand Economy. I did say to them, even I wouldn't read a book by that name, but they didn't listen. So never mind. Let's just see how I move it on. Oh, pardon me. So a little bit, as I said earlier, early on in the pandemic, Melbourne was described wrongly as the most locked down city in the world. It was actually the second most locked down. At that time, the focus was really on, it became obvious that there was something called a pink recession or a she-cession. So it was noted that younger women were leaving the workforce at an alarming rate. They were under significant pressure, having to homeschool young children. They were taking on much more of a burden in the home, with their usually male partners working at home. They were responsible for overseeing the children, for looking after aging relatives, for doing all that unpaid work, which, I'm sure most of your listeners know first at hand. So as I mentioned before, the focus was really on younger mothers. So when I say younger, I mean under the age of 40. So, you know, I'm 60, I feel young. So, but anyway, what I thought was interesting, because I'd done so much work on older women in my paid employment, was that nobody was really looking at the impact of potentially losing your job when you're over 40, often trying to pay off a mortgage or in private rental housing. A lot of women in Australia, and I'm sure it was the same in other countries, had adult children move back home because they'd lost their work. So they were doing just as much active parenting in some ways. A lot of them had teenagers homeschooling, as I did. And what it also meant was the loss of jobs or the loss of income had long-term effects for their retirement, and nobody was talking about that. So as I said earlier, I introduced this survey and slightly cheekily included a couple of questions around workplace bullying, because I thought that was relevant as well, around the conditions of work. So as you can see, just to move this bit out of my way so I can read. So the focus was on younger women, as I've said. So some of the outcomes for the women workers aged over 40 during 2020 to 2021, that's actually 2022, was that there was this huge impact on workplace health and safety. People lost their job, 50 people lost their job or had less job security, changes to wages, changes to hour of work. The women were on the front line of COVID in Australia, as I'm sure they were in most other countries. So we're talking healthcare, primary care, but also community care, aged care, childcare. So these were all industries that kept going in Australia. The men were security guards or truck drivers or working in the abattoirs, and there were challenges there as well, but really it was the women that bore the brunt of managing COVID in Australia. So here's just a few quotes I got from my survey about some of the horrendous experiences that women over 40 had during that time. So you can see that kind of, I won't read them out myself, but I'll give you a little bit of time to read them. I think it's the same in other countries, but rates of intimate family partner violence absolutely skyrocketed. And of course, most services had shut down apart from online or telephone services. Women who were at schools, because schools stayed open, even though most children were homeschooling, the children of parents who were considered essential workers still had to go to school. So as you can see here, the workload tripled overnight. The conditions of work, you know, really couldn't have been worse for those women. Bear with me. So then I came to the questions about the bullying. So I asked 2 questions about bullying, and I asked women whether they'd experienced any of these. You can see the 2 lists on the left and the right. So the one on the right is from Australia's own definition of workplace bullying. So these behaviours, and these are just some of the behaviours, they have to be ongoing to be considered workplace bullying. They can't just be like one-offs that happen. The group on the left here are from a survey, a UK survey into the National Health Service. So some of these things that might on their own just sound like standard work, and I'm afraid it was quite horrific how many times people said it was just standard work, like undue pressure to produce work. But you can see overall that just over half of the women workers who undertook the survey had experienced workplace cultures and bullying behaviours aligned with bullying. So that was the survey that I did. And I then went into more detailed interviews with some of those women. Oh, I've missed a page. What have I done? There we go. We go back there. So I was really interested in how much of the toxic work cultures in Australia were as a result of the pressures of the pandemic, or how much of them were influenced by Australia's general culture. And you can see just a few quotes here, which I pulled out, which I thought were really interesting. And the research I'm doing at the moment digs a bit deeper into this. So, as I mentioned earlier in my intro, when I was talking about my own personal experience, you know, female friends kept saying to me, why is it always the women that bully? You know, and these are women that you know, in kind of progressive or not-for-profit, non-government organizations that you would expect and hope to be supportive of other women. And on the right here, you can see some of the awful how women were affected by their health and well-being during those conditions of work during COVID. So, you know, 77% stress or anxiety, muscular and skeletal pain, depression, low self-esteem, headaches, migraine. They're conditions that don't just disappear overnight. But I was very keen as a feminist not to blame women, but really to look at the kind of systemic drivers for this kind of intra-gender bullying behaviour. So, of course, women dominate not those strategic, well-paying leadership positions, not in Australia anyway, but they certainly dominate the middle management tier. So they carry the operational burden, and many of them get the pressure from top down and bottom up. So it's very difficult. A lot of them also work part-time, yet from what I have understood, and I've tried to do some further research into it, but I haven't got much pickup with that or much support. But there's little evidence that part-time hours adequately reduce the burden of work. So a lot of us women, I know certainly my personal experience after returning to work from having children, and bosses were very happy to say, yes, that's fine. You know, you don't have to do 38 hours, you can do 25 hours. But they wouldn't change the position description, and the burden of work and the expectation on you to deliver was exactly the same. So women are experiencing that. And then, of course, they come home to finish their working day and starting the second shift of unpaid care. So women are, it's not that women are naturally bullying or mean girls or all these tropes that we see so bandied about so often. It's that we're under immense pressure, and that in the feminized sectors of work, I believe, and certainly what I've learnt from my own research, is that the burden of work is significantly higher than in male-dominated sectors. So there's this huge burden of work, and I believe a lot of women experience burnout as a result, and some of that comes out in bullying behaviour and pressure on other women to do their work and perform. So all the time that this was going on, as I mentioned earlier in my intro, I was noticing this incredibly different pattern of also highly gendered behaviour, which was taking place in hyperlocal digital sharing platforms of the Good Karma network. So, and it sort of came to me that this was a gift economy, something I'd never really heard of, which is quite shocking for somebody who's been in policy for 15, 20 years, but that shows the environment in which we work. Yeah. So a little bit about a gift economy. Hopefully most of our listeners know, but the research I did, so I analysed the interactions across 3 gift economy, Good Karma networks in Australia. They each had about 5,000 or 6,000 members from the local community. They were all in Melbourne, and using a number of keywords which were COVID related, like, you know, rat test, COVID, toilet paper, you know, so I used about 6 keywords to kind of pull out as many relevant posts and interactions as possible. And I identified about 800 interactions, and I analysed those into categories of how many of them were about women, how many were COVID specific, And then I tried to analyze them all through what I kind of developed as 4 gift economy categories. So these were, as you can see, material gifting. So that's the offer of material goods, saying, you know, I've got a lamp I want to get rid of. Does anybody want it? Requests for material gifts. So again, that's something material. I, in fact, said to put on the network, you know, our heating's broken. Can anyone lend us a heater for 2 weeks? And, you know, within 10 minutes, somebody had offered me something. Non-material gifting, by that I meant offers of support, care, information, which was relevant to COVID, funny stories, the gift of humor, the gift of experience, that kind of joining people together, offering advice, problem solving, all those sorts of things. And the alternative was the requests for non-material gifts. So requests often for information, recommendations, those sorts of things. So I hope that makes sense. They're not necessarily that easy to work out. So apart from my own data, which I got from the Good Karma posts, which I analysed, there was also a survey which they did. They did 2 member surveys, one in 2020 before the pandemic had broken out, and one in 2022. So both those surveys show that 86% of members were women, which to me was just phenomenal. And I was saying this to the board, and they were like, yeah, it was almost like they felt that was a little embarrassed. They kept saying, yeah, we've got to get more men involved. And I was saying, but you know, this is really significant that it's women engaging in this behaviour. I couldn't get them to see that, but so I took it. Oh, gone ahead. Anyway, so these are just some of the things that came out of the survey, why women were engaging. So they wanted positive interactions with the community. They wanted community information, recommendations, but they wanted to share free items. I've got that twice. They wanted to find opportunities to help and contribute. And this is back in 2020, before the pandemic. So after the pandemic, those statistics leapt hugely. So this is still the 2020 data, but we're already looking at 75% were looking to the Good Karma networks to help them solve problems. So the way the problems are solved, and I give examples in my book, was how a hive mind comes together. And, you know, people kind of say, well, I can do this and I can do this if you can do that. And it was really beautiful. And it was women coming together in the way that you're meant to in the paid workplace, you know, collaboratively making decisions. The fact that 66% agreed that networks had empowered them to ask for help. I mean, I thought that was really huge. 66% had learned new ways to solve problems. 91% thought identified that it had driven positive outcomes for the local community. So offering free items, providing help or assistance, you know, they were worth more than accepting free items, or local businesses. A lot of people are attracted by the sustainability element and the sharing of information, the sharing of humour, gratitude, and positive experiences were popular. So just a little bit about gender in the new economy. So as I know, the maternal gift economy, Jen, you've talked about, you know, so eloquently and so often, is that gender stereotypes and other binaries, racial, intellectual, able-bodied, they're absolutely foundational to growth capitalism. And it's really only by encouraging non-masculine behaviours that we can move beyond capitalism. What my research found was that women are increasingly, they're not bringing female-coded behaviours to the workplace. They're actually transforming into male-coded behaviours and becoming more aggressive. The kind of girl boss, God's police, those behaviours are rewarded. So typically, in Australia anyway, when there's workplace bullying, it's the target of bullying that exits the workplace. And quite often the perpetrator is actually promoted because they're seen as somebody who is hardline, authoritarian, leadership qualities. So, and yet, done it again. So at the same time, there was this alternative, collegial, inclusive, and careful way of working under the gift economy model. And here I just switched to some of your fantastic insights, Jen, which I'd never kind of thought about before. And I just love it because it's such a clear and paradigmatic alternative to the world we live in. It was, hugely eye-opening for me and really encouraging, which is great. So both of my pieces of research were in highly gendered workplaces. In the second one, 86% were women, as I said. 93.4% of the gifting posts were by women, even the non-material gifting posts. Men were involved, and quite interestingly, I thought sometimes they fitted into the gifting categories, but their gifts were most often beautiful photographs of their walks in scenic areas during lockdown. And for me, there was something a little bit ego-focused about that, because of course everyone would go, oh, that's such an amazing photograph. So even though they were saying, I'm giving this to you so you can enjoy the outside if you're not in this area, I felt that it wasn't quite other focused. But men were involved, and in one of the 3 networks which I explored, in the area which had a higher number of much younger men, high population of young male students, there was much more male gifting and gift giving. So I thought that was really interesting and positive, because that shows that perhaps, as time ticks over, younger men are more aware of that and they're more comfortable with those female coded behaviours. These were just some of the quotes which people put in the survey. I'm not going to read them all out, but this talks about some of the impacts that members of the Good Karma networks experienced from using those networks. And for me, it just shows that all those values which the maternal gift economy talks about so often, and the degrowth network, about collaboration, about community, about authenticity, about helping. People kept talking about a sense of belonging and how amazed they were to see how generous people were and how good it felt to give and not expect anything back. There's just a few more quotes. So more of the same, no nastiness. It makes me happy to know that there's a very supportive network where I can ask for help or offer help. So people felt really free and comfortable to ask for help, and that in itself, I think, is a gift in our very individuated world that we live in. So this slide's just about degrowth, which I'm interested in, but I'll kind of skip over that. But I do feel that there's an overlap with gift economy and degrowth. They're all post-capitalist imaginaries, as I call them in the book, I suppose. And that's just the lovely book cover, which I'm not responsible for, and my details. So I shall stop sharing there.
Thank you so much, Myfan. That was beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Am I still sharing, or I've?
No,
you're good.
That's good. I've got a beautiful picture of my youngest daughter on the thing, so it wouldn't have been all bad.
It's wonderful. Okay, let me just check in with Jen. Jen, do you have any insight or comments that you'd like to make right now, or questions directly for Myfan? And also, for those of you who are with us in the room and you have any further questions, please do enter them into the chat or the Q&A. So Jen, yeah, unmute, my friend.
Yeah, Myfan, thank you so much. That was really great. And
Thanks.
It's a wonderful addition to the whole gift economy picture, that the kind of research that you've done that shows how these networks are actually a transition towards a gift economy, and
Yeah.
it's important because people are always asking, well, show me
Yeah.
an example, and
Yeah.
there they are, and they have been. I mean, we have them in the United States too, the gifting networks, but
Yeah.
nobody has interpreted them in that way that you have, which I think is super important.
Yeah.
And also, yeah, the whole depiction of the exchange networks, or the exchange climate in the work that women are doing, and
Yeah.
how that has made such a negative outcome happen. And I think the contrast between the two is really great. So I thank you for it. It's really very important for all of us to have you on our team.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you so much. And you know, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, the maternal gift economy and your work, and so many of the wonderful people that I've heard in your salons, you know, they really influenced my thinking and helped it grow and gave it that kind of theoretical context. So that was amazing. And I, you know, I guess I'm a grassroots researcher, as the name of my consultancy says, and I'm really interested in those women's stories from the bottom, and those voices. But you know, it's marvelous to try and, you know, to find a way to connect the two, and from there, as you say, you can have all the theory you want, but without the examples and the kind of evidence base, it's hard to convince people. So I guess that's what I was trying to do.
Well, thank you. That is really great, because I think you're very convincing.
Oh, thank you. That's good. Tell my children that.
You need to give them your children's email address. She'll send them a letter.
Thank
We'll send
you.
them a
I should.
What do they think about your book?
Look, my elder child, who's in the room with me now and visiting me in Rome, which is just a total gift. She's actually read a lot of it, and but my 17-year-old, who is very interested in the same areas, but and they were both born in England, but the younger one was more raised in Australia, is very competitive, and even competitive with me. And I try and say, yeah, but you know, that's not. She's like, well, I'm going to write, you know, like she was trying to sort of say to me that I didn't really know anything about decolonial feminisms, and I'm like, have you read my book that I dedicated to you? But she won't hear it. So, you know, I'm not trying to force my opinion on anyone. She'll get there.
I'm sure she will. Yeah. So yeah, just I think the whole issue is really important, because we need a really deep paradigm shift if we're going to make it through this first part of this century, or even farther along. And the problems that patriarchal capitalism have made to arise are huge. And so we need a general shift in consciousness of understanding gifting instead of exchange. And I think that the whole neoliberal way that we have has intensified in the last years.
Yeah.
And that it may be partly due to the assimilation of women into positions of masculine power over.
Yeah, I agree with that, absolutely. I really do. And I feel that, you know, feminism, certainly in Australia, which is very privileged, white, middle class, you know, they want what they perceive as men having that power, and the kind of the sense of I don't think it was like that in the 1970s, but what it is now, and that kind of second wave women's lib stuff. But now it's all about success, achieving, notions of leadership, which I don't know what the academic word is, but I would call them bullshit. They're very individualistic and they don't really lead. That's authority. It's not leadership. And I think, the focus on things like, science and technology and, let's pay women sports players a little bit more. I'm not saying those things aren't important, but they're not really feminism. And there's certainly a very long way from what you describe as a kind of an alternative to patriarchy, a kind of matriarchal culture and a way of running the world. And they do nothing for that, and they dismiss other women and they belittle other women that don't live up to those standards of the patriarchal neoliberal system.
Yeah, the whole matriarchal studies movement that Heide Gertner Abendroth started
Yes.
has been so important and needs to continue to grow and be the wave that the gift economy is part of.
Yes.
Because it shows us that we are not originally a species that is patriarchal and warlike, but we are a peaceful matriarchal species, a maternal species. And that way we can revise our self-concept. I mean, it's really a shame that that humanity is so, which is such a wonderful species, has distorted itself in this way that is making killing the environment, and we're killing each other and dominating each other in these ways where we're not going to be able to survive. Or heal unless we revise ourselves completely, revise our thinking about who we are.
I agree, absolutely. And I think, there is an increasing amount being learned and understood, as you mentioned, about matriarchal formations of society in the past, and some more modern kind of things which are rising, which are fantastic, and some more of that kind of female coded or indigenous sort of First Nations way of doing things, which involve men as well. And I'm very much accept the fact that patriarchal is very bad for a lot of men as well, and we can't neglect social class and all those other factors in it, and it doesn't allow men to get in touch with their nurturing and caring side, and really what a loss. But yeah, so I think there is at least a greater understanding in Australia, which has a very terrible history of colonisation. I mean, even today, Indigenous Australians are the most incarcerated population in the whole world, which, considering they're a very small population, is just, it's horrendous. But Australia doesn't really accept a lot of that, and it's very bullish, and it comes under this what I do write about in my book, and I talk about a lot, which, as I call myself a lapsed Australian, actually, because I lived in the UK for 20 years, not saying that British is any better, but I just, I came back, and you hear all these kind of positions of what Australian culture is, and that it's about the fair go and mateship and the lucky country. I'm sure you've heard all those sayings, but really it's not. It's based on privilege, punitive politics, racism, sexism. It's got extremely high rates of violence against women. So, I just, again, it's that disconnect between the stories we tell ourselves of who we are and who we really are. So, it's those areas really interest me.
It sounds a lot like the United States.
Yeah, it's very influenced by the United States or
Oh.
by the UK, which is not a good balance, really. But, at the same time, it's a very multicultural country and, a lot of people are bringing new things to it. So there is hope, but yeah, we've got a long way to go.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, let's check in with Liliana and see if she has some questions and maybe pose them both to Myfan and Jen in case Jen has some input for that. So, Liliana.
Yes, there's a question by Patricia Herr, and it's for both of them. Bullying had reached another dimension during COVID, being officially encouraged by the government and media in Germany. Those unwilling to accept the repeated treatment with those experimental genetic therapy vaccines were officially banned, and the public was encouraged to give them a hard time in order to nudge them to accept the treatment after all. Did you do any research about that?
If you are you asking me?
Both of you.
Sorry, is that okay if I go first?
Yes, yes.
I was just going to say, I didn't do any research outside Australia, really, and I was just looking at that and just taking it directly from what women told me through a survey and through interviews. So I did very little about, the broader context. But I could say that, as I mentioned before, there was a huge escalation in violence against women from male partners, and also in rates of stress, anxiety, and depression that women experienced during COVID, but nothing really. I mean, there was a huge polarity in terms of vaccines, movement. So we had different states doing different things. Melbourne was very competitive against Sydney. Who had the most numbers? Who was winning? Who introduced? It's all competition in Australia, one-upmanship.
Yeah, and I don't know, is this question about the vaccines? Is that, did I understand that right? Is
It's about bullying of women.
Oh, well, I didn't understand it. I thought it was about the vaccine, so I am not gonna say anything about it. I didn't understand the question.
That's
Okay. That's okay. Thanks, Jen. Liliana, is there another one that you have?
Yes. There's this question that's is from Myfan. Can you explain more of your statement that you wrote in the presentation? In a gift economy, the more you give, the richer you are. Could you expand on that? And this is for both of you.
Okay, well, I'll just briefly say that I got that off Google Images, and I didn't come up with the quote myself, but speaking from personal experience, the thing which got me involved in those networks, as I was telling you about, and I started kind of gifting things whenever people needed things. Suddenly I thought, I can do that. I have that. I have the time, I have the capacity, I have whatever, the material things. And I did it, and it became almost slightly addictive or compulsive. It's like, this is actually, this is something that feels incredibly genuine and wonderful, and I feel part of a community and all those good things that I don't experience when I go down to my local shopping centre and buy something that some child in a underprivileged country may have made under terrible work conditions. So yeah, that's what I would say about it, but I will hand that one definitely over to Jen.
Well, I think it feels good to do gifting because that is who we really are. That is our basic nature as human beings. And we're deprived of that experience most of the time. So we go into alignment with who we are when we do gifting, and receiving is also important. And that creates relationships. The reason it creates relationships is that one person has cared enough about the other person to see what they need and actually give them what's appropriate for the need. And that other person has received that from the giver. So it bonds the two people together and it creates a relationship. And this happens on many different scales and with many different people. And like I always insist, it even happens in language. So like being able to answer a question is a gift, and being able to receive the answer to a question is a gift. So we have gifting all through our lives, but we don't recognize it, and so we don't put ourselves in alignment with it.
Thank you, Jen. Liliana, is there another question or
Yes.
comment?
Yeah, this is a question for both of them. Who are the storytellers in the maternal gift economy?
Well, I mean, I'll jump in there to say that I think some of the case studies that I include in my book are stories of the gift economy. So, you know, for example, and I don't know whether you want me to read it out, but yeah, there's
Go
just
ahead.
shall I read one out? I'll just,
Yes. Yes, please.
okay, let's just see. I'm not very organized to getting things into order.
No
Let's
worries.
try this one. So I hope this makes sense. In the book, I include a lot of it was responded to with emojis, and I kind of, you know, on one hand, I find them very irritating, but on the other hand, when they were kind of reproduced that way in the book, I wanted to keep them in. And in fact, my daughter advised me to keep them in because there was just so many hearts and expressions of love and joy through the emotions. But it's a little bit hard to read out because there's a number of people speaking. But the author started by putting a post saying, "Hi everyone, this is peak pandemic lockdown in Australia. Hi everyone, I'm taking a mental health break and wondering if anyone can donate any clothes or crafty stuff, please, as I can't have any visitors." And this post got 22 reactions. By reactions, I mean the emoticons, thumbs up or whatever, and 84 comments. And so one person answers, "Oh, I might. What type of craft things are you allowed?" And the author says, "Well, most things are okay, thank you." And so the other one says, "Look, I'll have a look tomorrow, but I just wanted to say my thoughts are with you, heart icon." And another person chips in to say, "Good on you for working on your mental health. I've been in your shoes and I know the feeling, heart icon." The author says, "Thank you. I'm doing it for my family and also hoping it helps me," laugh out loud. And another one starts with a purple heart saying, "I can't make it there personally, but I can mail you some things. I have also experienced a psych ward. Take care," purple heart. And the author says, "Thanks so much. It's so hard coming in with all the restrictions, the COVID restrictions." And somebody responds, "It's bad timing, but it would be challenging regardless." And another person adds, I visit a psychiatrist too, and would 100% love to help you if I lived closer. I hope other Good Karma Network members can." And another one also says, "I relate. You've had a really tough trot. Meds are such trial and error, incredulous in this day and age, but there might be one right for you. Each is a lesson about what does or doesn't work. It's taken 4 years for me of hospitalizations and various therapies, focusing on lifestyle helps." The author then says, "You've been through an experience like me, too much trial and error. I really hope I get a great doctor. I'm lucky to have a very supportive family too." And someone responds, "As a peer, it doesn't sound like your treating team is a good match. That's really hard. To be pragmatic, maybe just take what you trust and question the rest. Asking hard questions can be fruitful, but it can be so hard. You can also ask for a second opinion or different psychologist. The nurse manager can be a helpful person to speak with, ... thinking of you." Author, "I'm not confident, but I'll try talking to the nurse." Responder, "I'm not confident either, but it was worth it for me as my team were making me feel worse. No pressure to change. You can always do it a bit at a time and see how you feel." And another commenter, I live nearby, so I'm going to go through my wardrobe and maybe drop off some clothes and some craft tomorrow afternoon. Author, I really appreciate that. So you see, the thing that is amazing, of course, about that network was that somebody felt they were able to open up about one of the difficult things. To say I'm going to a psychiatric ward is huge, and there's huge stigma against mental health, but the number of responses and the conviviality, the empathy, the compassion, the willingness to give advice, the gifts of advice, gifts of love, gifts, physical, material gifts, clothing, craft things, like really detailed advice about, you know, how you might be able to improve the situation in complex medical environments, which can be very intimidating. So for me, I'm not sure if that answers the questioner's question, but for me, I felt that was an example of kind of that women coming together in the hive mind, but absolutely giving of themselves, expecting nothing back, to somebody who put their vulnerability on the line and asked for gifts of support.
It is perfect, Myfan. Thank you. Jen?
Wonderful.
I agree. I agree with that. Because it is a narrative that's constructed in the dialogue itself, and so it's so believable. You know, it's not just an imaginary story or even a story that's a narrative. It's a conversation, and we participate in it. So I think it's a wonderful example. There are, of course, there are narratives about the gift economy. People who have, beginning with like Marcel Mauss, who studied the indigenous people, but he didn't really see it as a maternal gift economy, because he said giving and receiving and giving back were the fundamental aspects of the gift. But that is like almost an exchange, as Myfan said. And what he didn't see is that giving and receiving itself, the first step of that, is already the basic logic, the basic motion that we have to tune into, and that it's under everything, under all of our communication.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you there. And I would say, and it was something really that listening to the salons really made me think about that communicate. And you've said this many times, Jen, and I think well, I'm really bad with names, but I think it's Susan Petrilli who writes about communication a lot. And you know, we all talk about that kind of exchange of communication, but what I read to you just then wasn't an exchange, it was a gift. You know, I think opening yourself up and asking for help in its way is a gift, because you're giving something unique and very precious of yourself. You're putting it out there, and seeing if anybody accepts that gift and responds with a like gift. And I think that you know, that was a really sharp point about communication shouldn't be an exchange, and it certainly, as we see now, particularly on the internet, it's more than an exchange. It's a total debate, and it's a competition. So everything's so polarized that we've kind of lost the art of listening and just accepting that even a very different viewpoint in its way, it's a gift because it gets you thinking in a different way, and it's a learning journey. That's how I try and think of it, even though I get infuriated at times on the internet.
Yeah.
Thank you, Myfan.
Thank you.
And while before I turn it back over to Liliana for a question, Frida was asking about your preferred pronunciation of your first name, and she would like to know about your name.
Oh, that's really kind of you. You're certainly not the first person to ask, I tell you that. And I've been called all kinds of things all my life. I've been called Myfan, Nathan, so many names, but anyway, my name's Myfan. So that's a silent A and a Y pronounced as an I. And it's taken from the French name Myfan, which beautifully means my rare or unique one. And so I make a point of telling people that all the time. And I was actually christened, well, I wasn't christened, but I was born and my parents named me Samantha, but my mother was reading Dylan Thomas, who's written a beautiful poem, I don't know if you've read it, called Myfan. And they decided to change my name to Myfan. They left off the "we" because they thought I might be teased at school in 1970s Australia. And I was teased at school in 1970s Australia, and I used to be called Myfan Wee, Myfan Poo, and all that sort of stuff. And I hated my name up until the age of 9. And then suddenly I thought, oh, I love my name. I don't know any other Myfans. So there you go.
It's beautiful. All right. Thanks for sharing that. That is truly, that's a gift that you shared, a little bit of yourself. That's a real gift. Liliana.
Yes, I have a question for both of you from Shelley. And she's, I'm thinking about education and gifting. I am wondering about the impact of giving grades for academic work. Does that prepare for a capitalistic viewpoint?
Jen?
Yeah, do you want to start, Jen? I have very strong opinions on this one, so perhaps you best go first.
Okay. Yeah, I think it does. It's like we commodify everything, even the knowledge that our children have or don't have. And so we give it a price, just like how much is your knowledge worth? How much was your effort worth? I think that grading is really modeled on exchange, commodity exchange and money.
Yeah. And look, I would agree exactly with that. And having had 2 daughters just go through the senior school in Australia through the system, my youngest now doing year 12, and the focus on grades, achievements, constant exams, even the class-based learning is assessed via an exam process. The comparing of boys against girls, and I remember that from when I lived in the UK, and every year they would report, you know, girls did better than boys, and it's like, why are we comparing girls and boys? You know, all you're setting up is a competition between the genders. And I think, I mean, I was very lucky because I didn't go to a school like that. I went to, you know, what was then a kind of much more progressive school that didn't believe in that kind of assessment too much. But now it's just gone more and more, and the pressure on young people is beyond, you know, it's so ridiculous that it is, you know, we've got an epidemic of mental health with young girls, in particular in Australia, young girls in the high school system. And I think learning is different for everybody. I do not think that going through school and getting a grade in year 12 proves that you're smart. It proves you can fit in with society's ideas of what they want you to be. I think so I'm ranting now. I think the school system is absolutely set up to try and create perfect little workers for the capitalist system. And if you're outside of that, my oldest daughter, who luckily has just left the room, is very artistic and not so academic. And for me, that is just as valid as passing any exam and getting into university. It's personal expression, it's a gift to the world. So the more that my kids have gone through that, the angrier it's made me. And I have thought, oh, maybe I should focus on my attention on that. But then I've thought I've got other areas. But I think it's infuriating, and I think it's toxic, and I think it is competitive, and it's targeted to feed into neoliberal capitalism.
Yeah. I would just like to insert here a comment. In Austin, Texas, one of the things I showed Jen was that there is a summer school that's given freely to educators on economics, but it's capitalist market economy. And so they're to take that back to their students. So they're teachers that are either high school or middle school and, college teachers who are continuing to infuse the capitalist model in the thinking of students as they become educated, which is just, this is how you perpetuate a non-functional system, anyways.
I think it is a type of indoctrination, and it is a curriculum which in Australia is designed at state level. It's government controlled. You're not allowed to deviate from it. I remember when my youngest was doing year 10 or 11, economics, and I said, have you learned about degrowth economics or gift economy? And she's like, no. And I said, well, perhaps you'd like to ask your teachers. I'd be quite happy to come along and talk to the class about the alternatives to the kind of economics you're learning. Of course, she said no, she couldn't bear to have her mother in the classroom, but it made me really angry. And I did think about writing to the school, but she banned that as well. Just saying, what you're teaching kids is actually quite depressing, and it's not going to help us get out of the mess we're in, because you're just promoting growth capitalism, which has got us to this stage of, planetary crisis.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like we're being taught all the things that we don't need to know and that are leading us over the edge of the cliff. And we don't have enough self-consciousness of it to even know it's wrong. And so everybody in their own way is trying to succeed in a market that is all separating people from each other and all ego-oriented. So, and those values have gotten worse and worse in the last decades.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very concerning. It's very concerning, for sure, because when you learn something, especially in a formal educational environment, it's assumed that it is the primary fact. It's the primary fact of life. It's actually the foundation of how we actually, succeed, how the world is, quote unquote, as opposed to it's a paradigm, it's a view of what the dominant culture is wanting you to know about the world, so you will continue supporting all of the things that feed into the economic model where the rich get richer and the poor just suffer. That's really a tragedy. Liliana, are there I think there are other questions.
Yes, there's plenty of questions. From Peggy Antrobus, can Myfan expand on the links, or Jen, on the links between the gifting networks and the degrowth as transitions towards a paradigm shift away from the current imperialistic, exploitative, racist economics model? How might this transition take place?
Okay, that's a pretty big question, Peggy. And from what I've heard from you before, I'm not surprised really, because you're a big thinker. I considered degrowth. So when I did my 2 studies in the book, I kind of use a few theoretical lenses, but the most ones are kind of the maternal gift economy and degrowth. And I'm not sure how aware you are of degrowth, but I guess I follow the theory and writings of Anitra Nelson, who is Melbourne based, who I've been involved with a few projects. She writes with French academic, perhaps Vincent Liegi. Anyway, they've written quite a lot about degrowth, and they came up with 4 core tenets of degrowth, which are, let's hope I remember them. Open localization. By open, that means it's not closed in a group in a way that a tribe might exclude others. So you're localized and you're locally focused, but you're open to other people coming in. Conviviality, so that's very much about interaction and how we deal with each other. Frugal abundance, and this is something, I think this kind of notion of abundance, which comes up in the maternal gift economy as well. And I noticed it as well as in some of the comments from the Good Karma Network survey. People spoke of joy and abundance, you know, things you don't hear in normal everyday working life in Australia anyway. And the fourth tenet is what they call the decolonizing of the growth imaginary. So that is that piece about changing the way we think. And so I tested all the kind of the 800 interactions from those 3 Good Karma networks that I looked at. I tested them all against those 4 tenets, and there wasn't one that didn't fit into one of them in one way, and really most of them fit in every way, because they were all about local economy, local connection, but they were open, you know, they weren't kind of tribalistic. They were always convivial. It was very rare for there to be any competition, any nasty comments, but I will say that there were moderators, and there were also, as my book covers, there was some there was what I call in my book bad karma or toxic positivity. So the networks have a focus on every comment must be positive. So there was no room for people to express something that might feel a bit negative. So that was an issue, and that's where the subtitle of my book comes in, the unbearable hazard of hierarchy, because some of the moderators and admins, you know, they got the power went a bit to their head, and they silenced some voices of dissent. And the other thing really was just, decolonizing the growth imaginary. I go back to what I said when I first started kind of gifting, and this kind of like, wow, this is so, really, it brought on a beautiful feeling for me to be able to help people. I didn't meet these people. It was COVID. I was just like, I can leave it on your doorstep, and, they'd be really thankful. I mean, I even, one woman mentioned that she had to move away because of family violence, and she was looking for, various bits of furniture and things. And I contacted her and put money in her bank account because I had some spare money. And, I didn't want any thanks for that, but I just, it just kind of felt amazing. And it, as Genevieve writes about so much, that kind of quid pro quo, I didn't expect anything back. The pleasure was the giving, that was the pleasure. And to have got something back would have taken away from that pleasure, and it would have made it smaller. So that kind of decolonizing of the growth imaginary. I talk a bit at the end of my book about, what we call heuristics, where we kind of make these, everything we do is automatically, oh, am I getting value for money? Am I getting the exchange back of what I've given in? And I talk about how the gift economy and practices of giving, not just talking about it, but giving something every day, whether it's, to your children, to your friends, random acts of kindness to strangers, it actually changes the brain. Our brains are elastic, and we have this kind of information infrastructure. And I look at the ways in which if we keep giving, if we keep doing, it'll change the way we think. Whereas most people, from what I see, think, oh, we've got to change people's minds. We've got to work on their hearts and minds, and then their behavior will change. So I kind of bring behavioral economics into it, not being an economist, so didn't really know what I was talking about, but hoped other people might, and sort of said, let's focus on changing people's behavior before we even tell them why. And I think that's that kind of decolonizing bit. And that once we start to think about that, then we can think, as we did during COVID, certainly in those communities, there was no money, there was no currency exchange. There was that circular economy within local communities of people sharing the resources we had according to need. I hope that answers your question.
That was great. Jen, do you have any input to that?
Yeah, I would say that it may change your brain, but what it's changing it to is what it already was when you were being nurtured by your mother.
Yeah.
So it's our natural socialized brain that is finally being liberated into doing what it was supposed to do in the beginning. And actually, I think there are studies that show that by giving and receiving, you have more of a hit of oxytocin when you do that. And then, so although I hate to think of that as an exchange, as doing it to get the oxytocin.
Yeah, and I think that's right. And maybe that's why it it does feel so good, because it is that original universal experience that you write about. It's sort of like coming home, that this is so familiar. This is how we're meant to be. And really, since that time in the pandemic, and quite annoyingly, perhaps for the rest of my family, but I've just walked away from shopping, from buying things. I'm just not interested in any of that material stuff, although I respect that, I've got teenage daughters that are, and they should have that right to be teenagers. But I've suddenly realized I don't need any of that stuff anymore. I just want the gift of time with my old friends or new friends, or feeling like I'm sorry, it's going to sound a bit holier than thou, but I just want to give something positive, contribute positively to the world in my remaining years. I don't want to take anything more. And I really take on board, what I've learned from the maternal gift economy about always say to yourself first, is this other focused? Focus on other. And, I learned, I had my children, I was 40 when I had my children. So I was very lucky, my second child at 43. So it's, that in itself is a gift to be able to have a child and at that age and that maturity. But, all I wanted to do was just give to them, and so that was an eye-opener for me. And I dedicate my book to them and to my wonderful mother, who I lost at a very young adult age from cancer, and all she gave to me. So it's that beautiful circle of giving, and I love that.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Thanks, Myfan. I think Liliana has some interesting questions that have come up. So Liliana.
Yes, I have two questions from Paola Melchiori, and the first one, she says, one, a problem. In Italy, the situation is similar. The pandemic made visible the invisible economy that holds the visible economy. This economy during the pandemic was recognized and praised, but in those conditions, it was also a forced economy, as it was demanding too much, and afterwards, all went back to normal. So how to keep this visibility, but also transform this recognition to diminish the exploitation part of it is the problem. How do you see this?
Okay, I was just going to say that for me, the kind of the celebrations of the feminized sectors. So, for example, the kind of, the clapping of the NHS, which took place every day, those kind of, upholding of the hard work, that women are doing on the front line. It's propaganda. It meant nothing. It wasn't that, when women were working under such difficult and under-resourced and dangerous conditions, I mean, that's, a third of the women in my survey experienced really quite strict health and safety, loss of health and safety, which is very strict in Australia. So the conditions were poor. They didn't even have PPE. They ordered all this personal protective equipment, which didn't fit women. It was built for men. So they then had to go. And so it was months before women even got that equipment. So in a way, yes, it was made visible while it suited the purposes of the economy. I don't think it was celebrating women or women's work. It was paying lip service to it. It was keeping women happy so they would do the job while they were needed to do the job and to keep on coming in, putting their own health at risk. And, you know, certainly in Australia, most of the COVID patients, victims, death toll were aged care workers and aged care residents. In Australia, aged care residents, 80% of them are older women. The workforce is 95% women, but people weren't talking about that. They were also one of the slowest sectors to get availability to the vaccine. So for me, it was, we've got a very right-wing dominated Murdoch media in Australia, and they were doing whatever they could to get that cohort of workers to fulfill the needs, while, as we know, the rich got richer and they got furloughed staff, even though they had millions. They made millions out of crisis capitalism. So for me, again, it's that messaging thing. It's like, wow, you're doing marvelous. You're all doing the right thing. We really, really value you. But in fact, we're not going to give you paid sick leave. We're not going to improve your conditions. We're not going to make your workplace safe. So, yeah, and that, for me, that's why it was so easily forgotten.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense, because it was appealing to a need, which is recognition, but it wasn't addressing the actual need, the necessary need, foundational of safety, recompense, you know, to ensure that they could have a sustainable life during that time. Yeah.
That's right. Conditions were getting harder. Work conditions were getting harder and harder for women, and home conditions were getting harder and harder. And just to be told, you're doing a great job, you know, that costs governments nothing. You know, that's what they're grandmasters at, that kind of propaganda.
There wasn't a systemic change that took place to ensure that the infrastructure would change once the crisis was gone.
No, there was nothing here anyway that I know of. And in fact, in Australia, and I'm sure it's the same the world over, you know, where the exodus from our feminised sectors, teachers, nurses, you know, we're recruiting madly from overseas because no Australians, they've experienced the conditions, the poor pay, and they've had enough. They're all burnt out.
Yeah. Jen, you have any input to that?
I agree with that. I think, yeah, it was beautiful to see some of the work that was being done by people, but then that did not generalize into something that could be sustained afterwards, and or was approved of or appreciated by the government. So a lot of people died, and a whole lot of healthcare providers died, and that was the price that was a sacrifice. The gifts they were giving turned into their own sacrifice of themselves.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Liliana, what is the part two?
Okay, so there's another question from Paola too. And the second question is, how can you get some information on how the indigenous societies and the non-indigenous women went through the pandemic? And what happened afterwards in relation to the referendum and its failure? The right to recognize in the Constitution the right of indigenous people to have a say was rejected. It was said that the indigenous people went into a mourning. What does it mean today?
Can I just check, you're talking about Australia and the referendum?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. What does it say today? It was a very dark day. It was a very dark year. As I mentioned before, we've got one of the most oppressed First Nations populations in the world, with some of the poorest health and life outcomes. I think it's a 10 to 15 year life expectancy gap. I don't know whether you have listened to something which the community, the Indigenous community came up with, which was what prompted the referendum into this voice to Parliament, as it was called. But it was called the Uluru Statement from the Heart. If you haven't read it, I would really urge you to do that, because it is one of the most beautiful and heartfelt pieces of, this to me was what social policy should look like. Having, as someone who's worked in social policy, what it's really about is what people need, what they need to feel a part of a society, involved, loved, included. So it was a really beautiful thing, but Australia being what it is, it just became a political hot potato. And so there was never really any full government backing for it. There were the against voices, the racist voices had a lot more financial backing and were a lot noisier. But there was also, it was further complicated by the fact that some groups of Indigenous Australians were also arguing against it, because they didn't think that it had sufficient, it was like almost, it was called the Voice to Parliament, but it was fundamentally, it didn't have any legal standing in the Constitution. So it was almost like an advisory committee. So there were Indigenous Australians, quite well-known academics, that were saying, well, no, this is rubbish. This is not enough. And others who were saying, this is a start. We get a foot in the door. We get mentioned in the Constitution, which is a new thing. And so once again, the people were unsure, there were conflicting messages, and it didn't get through. So that was a really dark day for all of us that really wanted to see it. I always feel a little bit as though I shouldn't be the one talking about what that meant or how it affected people, because obviously I'm from the colonizer settler population. But obviously it was in the same way that the kind of gay marriage vote things, it is a kind of expression of acceptance or an expression of rejection. And it was an expression of rejection. And so, yeah, that's been very difficult. And, the fight goes on, I suppose. We fight every day. And one thing I will say, I don't know if you've heard about it, but every year there's debate about having Australia Day on January the 26th, which was a very dark day in Indigenous history when there was a big massacre. And for some reason, we've chosen to celebrate Australia Day on that day. So it's a day of mourning for our Indigenous peoples. And more people are coming to understand that and accept that. And even now, some of the big supermarkets this year came out and said they weren't going to sell Australia Day, paraphernalia anymore for that day. So, I think things are changing. I think it's slow. We've got a long way to go, but more and more we're getting Indigenous people in positions of public speaking and authority and in government. So we can only hope and turn up at our rallies and do whatever support we can and listen.
Yeah, that's good allyship for sure. I have a friend who's an elder in northern Darwin, in the Northern Territory of Darwin, and it gutted her.
Yeah.
She has been very, very involved in creating bridges between the cultures.
Yeah.
And as a culture bearer, planted a medicinal traditional garden in a medical school and teaches alongside Indigenous medicine, alongside allopathic medicine. And it's a requirement that they need to understand both.
Yeah.
And she stepped away from everything. She
Oh,
was so disheartened. It took her
yeah,
out. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's
She hasn't stopped.
understandable.
Yeah, she
Yeah,
hasn't stopped, working, but she needed to just step away. It was just,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
understandably. Yeah, it is a rejection. And I think what was so disheartening about it was that, the kind of misinformation won, in that people were told that it meant that the Aboriginal community would have a veto over, bills in Parliament and these sorts of things. And it wasn't that at all. It was really such a minor role that they would have. It was just that any piece of legislation would be considered, using this group, this body, this committee or whatever, and it would talk to Indigenous peoples about what are the implications for their communities and their lives. So it didn't even have any legislative backbone. It was just an advisory thing. So it was, it was pretty depressing.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that education on that. This is a challenge, and being able to hear about the experience of Australia, it's the challenge of all colonies, any country that since World War II or before, trying to find their feet as a nation state,
Yes.
will continue to go through this process. And it impacts, of course, the economic model. It impacts how the focus of a country will address the needs of the people and the country and the interface with the world as it is globally. So
Yeah.
it's not a small thing. It isn't a small thing.
No.
Yeah. Good question, Paula. All right, Liliana, is there another question?
Yes. From Ruth Mirren, are there any cooperatively owned businesses in Australia? Is there a network similar to the new economy? This is for Myfan.
Yes, there absolutely are. There's the New Economy Network of Australia, NENA, which I'm involved with. I run the Women's Hub there, and I'm co-editor of the journal. And they're a fantastic organisation, and that just brings together people from all over Australia who are kind of involved in post-capitalist futures. And there's various hubs around housing and steady state, and we disagree in things, but it's a network and it's somewhere to come together. There's definitely also a great sector around cooperatives, and that's growing, I think, and particularly around the cooperative housing space, because we've got the same housing crisis as in most of the world. And I was actually involved in Co-Housing Australia, which is a peak body for kind of collaborative models of shared housing. I was on the board there until earlier this year. And there are cooperative models of housing, which are social housing, but with a cooperative overlay, and people are members. But yeah, there are a lot of companies kind of looking at that as an alternative, and particularly I think in a lot of the not-for-profit sectors. So Co-Housing Australia was a cooperative, NENA's a cooperative, Degrowth DNA Australia, we're cooperatives and we're all members, and that's really important. It doesn't mean that it's been interesting for me as somebody who has long advocated for cooperatives and horizontal governance, magically thinking that would solve all problems. It doesn't. Ego arises, competition arises, but I'm still a strong advocate for that. We're not going to find one model which is perfect, and in any group dynamics there are issues, and we have to learn to talk to each other and be open to changing our mind and understanding how different people see things and learning. And, if we can do that collectively and as a group, opening up dialogue rather than closing it down, especially in the name of well, I'm your boss, or I have authority over you, even though I may be less experienced, less knowledgeable, you know, all those kind of arbitrary power relations. So I think cooperatives are the way of the future. I think they're a really good start. I think there's a long way to go. But one thing I do really believe in and advocate for and would like to see happen more, a kind of model which I've come across in the US, and I'm not sure how much. I know there is in Amsterdam, I think, as well, but like locally based care cooperatives. So there's a model in the US where it's a cooperative and all the community care workers are women, all the clients, whether they're with disability or aging, they're all members, and they all make decisions in how the cooperative is run, and it's locally focused, and you know, there's no time limits on how much the worker spends with the person. It's about, you know, developing relationships. It's relational. They share in profits, they share in decision making, not just the workers but the clients as well. And I love that idea of bridging, you know, that gap between the giver and the taker.
Is there some kind of a website or something where we could find out all this information about what's going on in Australia and in these alternative initiatives?
Yeah, I mean, there's various kind of groups, like the New Economy Network, and people post information there. That's probably my go-to one that I like the best. But Degrowth Network Australia, and we've really just emerged in the past year, and we're building a website and creating a map of all those pretty much gift economy things around Australia. So things like community gardens, repair cafes, buy nothing groups. So all those sorts of things, we're creating a map and trying to link all those practices together to build an evidence base that way. So I'm happy to share some links with you know, that you could explore afterwards.
Great. Thank you.
Yes, that's something that we actually need to see. I also think that people's what is it that you say, to help decolonizing of the growth imaginary, need to see some visual input where they can take the visual into an action, because there's something about actually engaging yourself in the concepts to stimulate more thinking. It forces you to open up your mindset.
Yeah, and look, I'm living proof of that, because that's exactly what happened to me. You know, it was through kind of looking at those gifting practices and thinking, wow, this is something so different and so valuable, and you know, so genuine, that I really started thinking about that. You know, I come from a tradition myself of being, you know, uber competitive and, you know, all those sorts of things. You've got to be high achieving, even within the you know, the social sciences and the systemic advocacy roles. It's just pressure, competition, individualism, awful. So yeah, I think the more people engage with it and the more we give them opportunities to engage, the more they can see the other way by doing rather than hearing, because people aren't listening.
Yes, I think that when we show the similarities, it negates, or I don't know, it neutralizes the idea that there's competition. It neutralizes the idea, because you're seeing the similarities and how they're in service to each other, their communities. And those are the actual core values. Of course, for us, deeply, we want to emphasize the fact that it is natural, because it's maternal. It's natural, and it's the way that we are as humans. So, you know, once we filter that down, but there needs to be at least one little opening, as you say, your experience of maybe despair and frustration brought you to look for something different.
Yeah, and I think just seeing those examples of hive mind decision making, which are very different from, you know, a lot of workplaces, and I'm sure this is the same when you're all based. They kind of have these public, what they call values or mission statement that, you know, teamwork and, you know, connectivity, collaboration, and it's just words on paper to me, because if you're not doing that with me and you're, you know, you're undermining my work or taking my work and not giving me credit, and, you know, it's just, you can say anything you want, but you've got to really act in those ways and be generous and think about other people. And we just, you know, it's that kind of gift economy thinking is completely structured out of the work system, the labour market in Australia. You know, it's structured out and they don't want it to come in. They're very, very scared of that.
Yes. Yeah. Jen, yes.
I just wanted to ask a question. I think the gift of the truth is a really important issue. And it's certainly the big issue now with Gaza and all of the terrible things that are going on. And I was just wondering what you think about Julian Assange.
Yeah. Oh, look, I mean, I'm not a Labour voter, but I thank the Labour government for getting him out. I think it's an absolute example of the powerful against the powerless. And although I didn't entirely, I entirely agreed with him releasing that data, which is so hidden. It did put certain people's lives at risk, and that was slightly contentious, but I'm very happy he's out. I'm a supporter. I do think there was a time where, when the first kind of WikiLeaks stuff came out, that, he was getting a little bit, oh, I'm a rock star and aren't I fantastic and I'm going to save the world. And, they wanted to take him down a peg or two, and maybe he did need being taken down a little bit. But I think it's hugely important that we have that kind of whistleblower thing, which we don't have. And, you talk about the lie and the truth, and I do address that in my book, and the kind of writings of Barbara Alice Mann, which I listened to through your movement, about the importance of the truth and the patriarchal nature of the lie. And I do look at institutional gaslighting. I've got a chapter in the book called Working by Gaslight, which is really just focused on women's stories of, if you're bullied at work, it's not, basically what typically happens is it's you're the problem. You become the problem because you've raised an issue. And it's the same with whistleblowing. We've just had, I don't know if you read this case as well, but it was an Australian. He was from the Australian Security Services. There's been a couple of cases. One was about Australian soldiers abusing human rights in Afghanistan, which included murdering civilians. And he blew that whistle. And even though action has been taken against those soldiers, he went to prison for, exposing state secrets. So, that fundamental right to tell the truth, that it doesn't really get more important than that. And I think, my own experiences of work and in the book, it talks about it all the time, and the effect that has on the people that experience that. It's very much, and I'm writing about this in my next book, and I mentioned that my next book is focused on case studies about workplace bullying. It's called a special place in hell, after the famous quote. But really, women talk about how, they create this alternative reality is created. And it reminded me very much of the kind of psychological abuse that some men put upon women in the home. And it is that kind of psychological control and just denial of your own reality, and the effects on that of women. And I've interviewed maybe 50 women now for the book, and just the really long-term devastating effects of losing the trust in your own judgment and capacity and sense of reality is enormous. It really is enormous, and it's really hard to get back once you've lost it. So yeah, I think truth is everything. And you know, it's one of the things that frightens me most about Trump, and I'm sure it's the same with you all. It's that the lie has become normalized. The lie is now the truth. It's very you know, George Orwell would be you know, giving himself a pat on the head in his grave, I'm sure, saying, yeah, got that one.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Liliana, do you have one more question? I think we might have time for.
I have a comment actually by Peggy Antrobus. She says, thanks, my fan, for your presentation. Some of us had hoped that the abundance of gifting that occurred during COVID may have led to a shift towards alternatives, but sadly it didn't. The decision maker just tried to return to the old patterns. Perhaps the climate crisis will do it. What do you think about this?
I guess I would say that, you know, as somebody who considers myself a degrowth armchair activist, I don't get out too much. I think, you know, in degrowth, we kind of say that change will happen by design or it will happen by disaster. So that change is coming through the destruction of the planet. For somebody like me who is, you know, I guess a bit prone to depression, if that's not oversharing, I have to try and, you know, really focus on being positive and motivated and just thinking we just have to keep pressing away, keep honing our messages, keep trying to, in a very convivial way, listen to people and change their opinions and their behaviour, as I talked about before, their economic behaviours. And I think we just, it was very difficult after COVID, and that we're still not after COVID, in fact. But, you know, we keep hope, don't we? And we talk to people and hope more and more people understand. And, you know, I guess I'm kind of like the living example of somebody who, you know, gave up work, took a little bit of leave, decided to educate herself a little bit more. And here I am now 2 years later, like, you know, really passionate about the maternal gift economy and the work that you all do, and the very deep thought and just the potential of having an alternative paradigm. You know, people don't understand that there's an alternative. So to try and get that message out there, that's what I hope to do with my book, and that's what I hope to do with my next book, you know, by trying to engage the women's movement around just how toxic the workplace has become for them. You know, that they don't have to do that system. There's another way, you know, and try and bring them together like that. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but yeah, we have to keep hopeful, and all we can do is keep trying. We can't give up.
That's
Beautiful.
perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, those are excellent words to end on. Let me just check in with Jen. Do you have anything else you'd like to say before I sort of close us out?
Yeah, is it okay with you if we put up a notice of your book on our website?
Oh, yes, please. That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your book. It's really great.
Oh, thanks, Jen. And thanks so much to everybody for coming today and for inviting me to this beautiful salon event. I've really enjoyed it.
Wonderful.
Beautiful. I want to encourage people to actually get the book, because really one of the things that Genevieve always reminds us is that we need a paradigm shift. And in order for us to be able to assist in that endeavor, we need to be able to have accessible sort of storytelling materials that provide a gateway into opening a mind that maybe hadn't even thought that the choice that they're making in their workplace is an economic choice. And, you know, this is the way that as feminists, you know, every single choice that we make is an action in the direction of our future. So if we can help to co-create that future where, you know, the future is maternal, you know, a matriarchy, the maternal gift economy, And it really isn't the future. It is where we exist now. We are just not actually acknowledging where we are. And we need to accept the responsibility and an obligation that isn't a negative, but it is an obligation for the continuation, as Jen always reminds us, for the continuation of the species of humans and the continuation of our planet. So I want to thank you both for this very interesting and stimulating conversation. Myfan, your book is really, really going to have an impact, and I'm just very excited to hear your next one. I love the title. What was it? A Special Place in
Special
Hell.
place in hell, yeah.
That just made me laugh.
Yeah.
So yes, I want to also thank Diane, who is ever the support in the background with us, and Liliana for chasing down and organizing comments and questions. On behalf of the International Feminists for the Gift Economy Network, I want to thank each of you for attending today here in this Zoom room. And for those of you who are watching this recording, I hope that you will want to share this recording with others. The recording will be up at the maternalgifteconomymovement.org. We welcome your questions and comments. For those of you in the room today, if we did not get to your question, we'll make sure that Myfan has a copy of the questions and the comments so that she can peruse them, and also a copy of the email addresses of those who are in attendance. If you have questions or comments, please do send them to us at maternalgifteconomy@gmail.com. Next week, we're going to have another salon, and it's our first salon in July with which is July 13th, salon number 68. In June, Maria Suarez Toro, Joan Marler, Vicky Noble, and Sorel, oh no, I'm going to just butcher this name, Mocia de Coligna, it's an Italian name. We're in Costa Rica to actually create bridges of understanding and connections about archaeomythology and the gifts that brings. Maria Suarez, Joan Marler, and Vicky Noble are part of our network as the Maternal Gift Economy. We hope that you'll join us. This is part 1 of part 2 because it involves Indigenous people and youth as a cross-generational conversation, and the gifts that come through the understanding and the deep awareness of being connected to the ocean, the earth itself, and our ancient and future discoveries. If you haven't signed up for notifications of upcoming salons and events, please do. You can do so at our website at maternalgifteconomymovement.org. I want to thank everyone for your kindness, your attention today, and we are just so happy to be with you. And Myfan, we look forward to much more of your research and what you have to offer. And may the maternal gift economy flourish, degrowth happen, and connections and relations all the way around. Peace, everyone. We'll see you next week. Take good care. Bye for now.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.